Martins.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Grassroot Chats Future Show, brought to you every Wednesday by us, the wonderful gentlemen from the Grassroot Rats studio. Did I say Grassroot Rats or Grassroot Chats? I'm confused. I'm so excited. These things get to me every now and then. With me in the wonderful studio is Big Steve. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. How you doing?
I'm always good, sir. Nice one. And of course, we have the wonderful founder of Doubleedged, Neil Waddle. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good, man. Good.
Nice. I see you're presenting your brand in your head. I like it. It's all good. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, the Future Show allows us to debate, talk about topics that we like, that are trending, or topics that we don't even like. But, we'll just keep doing it as we can. Please join us, subscribe. Instagram is at Grassroot Chats. Same thing with Twitter. And have your say or let us know what you think. It's a very simple question this week, people. Very simple. The January transfer window is closed. Wonderful teams made wonderful buys. Got rid of some wonderful players. Got rid of some crap players. But now the question we want to know, especially with the way this January transfer window went, should we actually go back to a certain point where there's one transfer window and maybe that's just summer, or players can actually move between clubs anytime without actually having a window? Does the January transfer window work? I'm sure it has worked over time, but usually a lot of teams go in for players because they want to improve their team there and then and make sure everything is wonderful. Big Steve, are you a big fan of the January transfer window?
Yes, because it does give some structure to the course of the season. If you've got how it used to be where players can move anytime during the season, it can get very disruptive, especially the way football is now. With so many players to a club. I think it works for the teams stuck in like relegation battles. It gives them a chance to make a difference halfway through the season and improve things. I don't think it works as much for some of the bigger teams season after season. There's been a couple of good windows that's worked out for bigger teams like Man United many years ago, Liverpool with Van Dijk. But generally, season after season, you don't see the big teams making massive changes to their personnel during the January transfer window. So it's more of a lower half of the table thing.
So, but if the January transfer window works for some and it doesn't work for others, why do you still then think it works? I mean, there have been some players that have gone to some good teams and have done wonderful things. And yeah, I mean, Jesse Lingard going to West Ham last season was wonderful in January. But I think it works more long-term. And at the time that players were able to go to clubs at any point in time, it also did work. It wasn't as disruptive as you say. And now with a whole lot of more rules and registered players here and there, I mean, the January transfer window just seems very rushed. Players just have this feeling of, maybe I'll go here in January. Neil, what do you think? Are you a fan of January transfer window? And even if it does kind of work, do you think it can be better implemented with just maybe one transfer window?
The January transfer window was one of my biggest annoyments in my Football Manager career on Football Manager. When it was introduced, it changed my world of not being able to buy players throughout the season and only buying them at certain areas. It really was a fundamental change to my life and the way that I played that game. Rolling on several hundreds of years, it seems like. It was massive, right? Because I was buying players left, right, and centre when I wanted. If Gaza was playing well at any club, I could just buy him when I wanted. I'd have to wait until a certain point. The transfer window's now been in long enough that it should be implemented and used more effectively. And I think that's one of the problems that we now have. So let's take, I don't know, we could take Arsenal for an example. Didn't get who they wanted in September or July, whenever the window was this year. I think in January, they should be ready to strike, right? And it should be, you get into day 1 of January and you're getting players in, day 2, day 3, and they're all done and dusted. You know who you want. You've already had the little bit of a talk that you shouldn't have had. It's not like it's come out of the middle of nowhere. No one's suddenly bidding for a player that wasn't on at least spoke about at some particular point. So I find it really odd that teams aren't more pragmatic with the January transfer window. You've got Arsenal still trying to sign a striker 30 odd days. I mean, they might have signed someone by the time this goes out, which will be really, really good. But they've been after the same player for 4 weeks who they didn't get. They must have known that he wasn't going to come at some particular point, and they move on to someone else. So that's a bad look at it of where it's gone. Liverpool signing Van Dijk a few seasons ago is an example of it working really, really well and getting him over the line. When Arsenal signed, I believe, Aubameyang when he was in top form, they signed him in the January transfer window as well. So it can work really well as long as the plan is implemented correctly. However, the spectacle of television at the end of January, and tomorrow I will have my Sky Sports News on all day and a ticker tape running through. I'll probably wear something yellow just for a little bit of fun. I'll have it all on, and that will be enjoyable, right? So we'll have... I enjoy the spectacle of everything. What I don't enjoy is the way that the teams are go about it, and I think that's probably the frustration. But who would you have liked to assign for United, who they haven't assigned? Should they assign them in January, or should they wait? Is it just an offload window to middle clubs?
I mean, I kind of see that's a good question, because I kind of see the January transfer window as more offload than onload. I think it's one of those situations that you have had a couple of months, you have looked at the players you have, and you go, okay, certain players will probably benefit at a certain point, let them go on loan, and hopefully if they have a good season, come back in at the end, have a good summer and all that story. I mean, with United, with the question you asked about United, Ralph had said Man United wasn't getting anybody. And it was, so you weren't expecting much. But the thing with the January transfer window, like I said, it works long term, where you buy a player, this guy is not just coming to change everything. Now, with time, he'll blend into the team. So you also mentioned that with the fans, it's nice. I mean, with the fans, I think these things are always nice. Hopefully somebody good comes to your club. Hopefully you get rid of somebody you don't want there. But for the players, though, so some players use it as opportunities to again, make things wonderful. For the players, it's not as easy as we make it seem. When we watch the game, they have to go to these teams, learn a new style of football. Some it might even take time for them to blend in. Generally, with the January transfer window, doesn't seem like it has a good balance. I think if there was a vote as to get rid of it, and in place, go back to the old system of players moving whenever they wanted, or just stick into one big transfer window, I probably will go for that. But Big Steve, I take it especially with the way your club has run things. You're a big fan with the January transfer window.
I'm not overly a fan of it because, as Neil said, it's weird the way it runs because everything's saved to the last day. At the end of the day, you know what you need. And you know the window's coming up. So just do your business early. The quicker you do your business, the better it is for the club and the team to progress on the pitch. So I don't get why everything's done in the last 2 days. Just doesn't make any sense.
Well, saving it in the last days, it helps with bargaining. Clubs have been holding out and they come to realize, okay, this thing might not actually work. We have to let them go now. So I think it's a business tactic, though. What do you? I mean, you were about to say something. Sorry for cutting you.
Yeah. No, I agree with you about the business tactic. But some clubs, I wouldn't expect that. Just go and do your business. Some players, yes, you want to haggle and get it for the best price you can be. But if you need, say, for example, a striker, you've identified the player. Just go and pay his release clause. You'll know what he is. If he fits, he fits. Just go and do the business. Get him in, because you need that player. Instead of mucking about and trying to negotiate and then he goes somewhere else, that just you're hurting your plan, in my view.
So I mean, when you look at the January transfer window, and so the first window shuts at the end of September, or is it August? One of them, and then teams now go, okay, we have this certain crop of players, we know what needs to happen, and then the season starts. And you might think, okay, come January, it's been tough. So it's more like it's a restart kind of thing in the middle of the season where you go, we could get in some good guys here if we can get the certain players that we want to. But then again, it's still long term. So you get a player before the season starts, pre-season, he comes in, does his thing, and then he blends with the team. January, though, I mean, once again, apart from when you think about its steady impact in January, where a player comes in to actually do things within that short window, how many can you really think about, Neil? How many do you actually go back and say, for the short-term purpose, which a lot of teams do this actually worked?
I mean, there's a double-ended sword there. Double-edged sword, not double-ended. I don't know what you're doing with that sword. You've got if you look at the window of, if you're a player and you're not getting first team football, you can move, right? Which is a really good thing for that player, and that they can be moved out and they can restart their career. I understand that it might be hard moving new jobs and changing the way that someone else plays football, but it's their job, right? They're kicking the ball about. I mean, I know that it must be really so much of a struggle for them to start a new job in their prime, and understanding that that's all they do all day is play football. It must be, I mean, it's immensely painful for them. That struggle that they go through of going, can you kick that round thing in that goal, right? Simplistic terms. I've started jobs halfway through the year, right? I didn't wait for it and gone somewhere else and still managed to continue to do a level of a job. So it's harder maybe if someone comes from abroad and comes over and it's a different culture and they're not used to what's going on, or someone from here goes abroad and they struggle from that point of view of learning a new language, etc. So every club's got, I would assume, has got a scout set up, a really good scouting network in place for everybody that they're looking for. So we'll pick Arsenal because it's an easy one. They need a striker. They've probably got 10 scouts looking for strikers across the world, knowing who they're going to get. Steve's right. Why don't you go and play the release clause? In Spain, they have to have a release clause in everyone's contract. It's what it gives it fair, and it makes it easier to know that we don't have to have that in this country, but it makes it easier to go out and do that. Well, we think he's worth at least this to us. If you want to get him mid-season, you're going to have to pay a little bit more. That's just part and parcel of it. It's good. I mean, they can get some, but I feel that why are we waiting for so long through it to get somebody in makes absolutely no sense at all. They must have targets identified. There'll be players that suddenly come and go, actually, you know what? I thought I could get in. I'm not going to get in. Let me go. And they'll go. And that makes great sense. The lower league clubs buying players the lower end of the Premier League trying to buy players to stay in. That makes sense as well. Jesse Lingard wanting to leave Man United to go and play first team football makes perfect sense. Dele Alli to go play first team football. They all make sense. And the problem I suppose you get with that point is when they all go, is the squad players leaving. You need more squad players in. So then you're going to have to buy someone else at the last moment. But it all does seem a little bit last minute planning. One transfer window would make it so hard if you got loads of COVID problems and you got injury problems. You only 25 players that they allow in the Premier League to be registered, plus you're allowed your under 21s registered as well. It will make it hard and make it impossible. If you had it all year through, it might be the easiest thing. You're only allowed to play for 3 clubs, I think, 2 clubs per season. And then
2
the next
clubs
one you're
per
not.
season, yeah.
And the next one you're
unless
not allowed.
there's an exception in terms of 3 clubs, like Lucas Moura had when he joined PSG.
I didn't know, and that was brought in, that the Champions League no longer gave the cup tie, so you can now move Champions League teams through the season. That's another good thing. So that gives the Champions League teams who are in there a better chance of winning, because they can go out and buy somebody in order to help with what they're missing at that particular point. Look at Aguero retiring halfway through the first half of the season. That means Barcelona can go out and get Aubameyang. That wouldn't have happened if we didn't have a window. So that's a bonus for their club from that point of view. Do we give them a special circumstance because the player's retired?
But then if we had the window all through where players could move, they could possibly do that. But then, okay, first, let's break this down, Big Steve. Big Steve, if you're explaining to like a 4-year-old the advantages of the January transfer window, explain the advantages and disadvantages. And then let's see the pros and the cons, and let's see which one actually makes sense.
To a 4-year-old?
Yeah, to a 4-year-old. Make everybody understand to that level.
The angry one's not here.
He will be listening back, so we'll find out if he understood afterwards. We'll ask him next week.
So the January transfer window is an opportunity to turn around your team's fortunes for the better, and an opportunity to clear out some players that you no longer require in your squad.
Okay. But so It could be 50-50 though, because the way you've just mentioned it is you can clear out and you can add, but there's no guarantee that it will actually make things happen.
No, there's no guarantee. That's why you don't see the big clubs really going hell for leather in the January transfer window. Yes, Liverpool signed Van Dijk, but that year they actually wanted to sign him in the summer. And they only went back, because that deal the way they went about it went horribly wrong, they went back for him in January. But a lot of the big teams have a settled plan. They do their business in the summer, get the players in pre-season, and have them for the course of the season. They'll dip into the January transfer window if there's, I don't know, injuries or something like that, and they need to fill in a gap. But generally, January's for teams that are, in my view, scrambling around trying to find a solution, because their long-term season, how can I say, project hasn't worked out.
I mean, Neil, how would you describe the biggest advantage the January transfer window has, and why it should actually remain?
The biggest advantage it's had is been able to sign a player that you need at that particular time, or that's come about. You might have a club that's in financial turmoil all of a sudden that can sell a player. You might have a player that you didn't know that was absolutely banging goals in Ligue 1 in France, and going, right, he's only got a 30 million euro release clause, let's go and sign him. So the advantage of it is clubs with money can go out and buy it. But we're only looking at the Premier League. If you look at the lower divisions, it gives it an easier opportunity for people to move and get signed where they're not getting the game time, and they will be released at the end of their contract. So they need to be in the shop window. They need to be playing. You, as a footballer, you should want to be playing week in and week out. Like, that's what you would expect to be doing. Or we say squad players, like they're not good enough to be playing, or they should be sitting on a bench and coming on. But as a footballer, I believe that most of them will think they're good enough to be starting the games. Do they feel that they should be substituted or not playing every game? Probably. But the term squad player maybe is a little bit derogatory to a lot of the players. There's got to be a time where at the pros, and the advantage of the January transfer window is you've got that midfielder's missing in your team. You've noticed that the player that you thought you had isn't good enough. You know Van der Beek's gone to Everton because he was never good enough for United. That type of thing. And you go, right, he's gone. We've done the bit of business of getting him out. We can now replace him. That may be you right, replace him at the end of the window. In the new window in July. But you know that he's gone. He might have had a season there. And rather than him being rotten on the bench, he's gone out and played 20 games for Everton and played really well. And then he signed for West Ham the season after. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, it just ends up players just rotting. So you have to have something in, because once a year is just not enough. And it's unfair on the players who aren't playing, who are good enough for other teams, to not get football. And I think that would be the shame, the biggest shame of all of it, that they don't get to play and they just get to sit on a bench for a whole year and they don't play anyway.
So I mean, I'm a big, I don't know if you've noticed, but I'm definitely a big fan of the anytime transfer window. Let's just get this wrong.
Your club's got money, that's why.
First, you make it sound like we stole the money. We had to win, become victorious.
I believe. The club was borrowed, wasn't it? Big mortgage to buy Man United, I believe. I could have taken a loan out to buy them at that point.
No, you couldn't. Not you. Especially, definitely not you. Definitely. I mean, Man United had. I remember in January signing Patrice Evra and Vidic. In that particular window, they were terrible. Terrible. They couldn't get to the grasp of the game. It took them time, but long term they became. They're two wonderful club legends at the moment. So as I said, long term it works. But you guys have mentioned the fact that you signed these players in January simply because, okay, something hasn't been working. We now have to identify players that will come in and do that. But then I'm pretty certain not all these players come in and have an instant impact. So it still boils down to, long-term stuff. And then, yes, you can talk about an advantage when it comes to Newcastle, for example, getting money as they got in and then trying to fight relegation, and they brought in some wonderful players in January that can hopefully come and, change stuff. I get that. But at the end of the day, everything is looking towards long term. if you could scrap the January transfer window and do any time, I think it would work better, personally. Or do you disagree, Big Steve?
If the transfer window was the whole season, I think you'll probably see prices be a little bit less,
Which is good for the clubs.
Yeah, because there wouldn't be a pressure to do everything within a certain window and in a certain time frame. So you know that at the moment everything has to be done by the end of January. If you had the course of a season, then there's not that snowball effect, because if I lose a midfielder and I lose him in February, I can take my time and get one in March. But at the moment, what happens is, if I lose my midfielder in January, the third week, I've got like a week left to go and buy someone. And then I'll just get jacked up the prices.
Surely, though, if you could lose a player anytime, it will force a lot of managers and clubs to actually try and use as much of their squad as they can. Because then you understand that you don't have the... I mean, Van der Beek is an example Neil has brought up every now and then. There are certain times that there have been holes in Man United midfield, but you have not given this guy enough chances to prove himself. Kellen Chambers is another one. So, but if you know, clubs will be very careful who they go for and who they let go if you could have an anytime transfer window, which means you probably use more of your players and give them more chances. Or do you disagree, Neil?
I disagree.
Surprise, surprise.
No, I think there's... So the January transfer window, as more and more time has gone on, there's been a lot of loans. I don't just mean loans out from your team, Steve. I mean, like, there's a lot of loan deals, because people go, well, we want their game time, right? So they've got the Van der Beek deals at Everton. That's a loan. If it was in the season, it wouldn't have loaned him. Would he have got any game time? No, because he's not good enough. You're not going to give him game time. Even he's had the chance already, right? He's not good enough. They've already judged and said, no, you're not good enough. I've said it about 5 times. He's not good enough for United, right? McTominay's keeping him out of the team. Steady Eddie Tomney is keeping him out of the team. He wasn't signed to be a player that wasn't going to be there. So these accidents happen of the players that you sign. And unfortunately, they have to get moved on at some particular point. And the loan is why the Christmas transfer window works. Sorry, the New Year transfer window works nicely, because he can go out on loan, and it's a win-win if he does well. If he does poorly, they'd have wished that they sold him. But at the moment, Everton are where they are, and they probably don't want to make any overestimations just in case they do go down. That will be in the back of their heads, going, if we do go down by some pure horrible instance and we never get any run of a turn of form, we're going to be lumbered with these players. Newcastle are filthy rich at the moment, and they don't have to worry so much about signing players for 40 million. Signing, is it Guimaraes for 40 million from Leon? And there's nothing in there if he goes down. There's no wage reductions or anything like that. He literally is just flat. But they've got the money to do that. Other clubs don't. By having players in the shop window for the whole season would be unfair on the smaller clubs. Because if you've got a player playing really well, like Declan, West Ham aren't a small club, but Declan Rice at West Ham, and then suddenly, come February, March, West Ham have come in 4th, 5th, Man U are like about the same, and they go, oh, you know what, Declan? We'll pay you 300 grand a week if you come here. Oh, I could do with that money. I don't need it, but that'll be nice. And he goes, right? I don't think Declan Rice would, but they could go, and that would be unfair on West Ham.
The demand for Declan Rice, if it's there at the time, will still be there. He knows he can play out to the end of the season and still get to the club and still get that amount of money, because at the end of the day, Man United or which any other club that wants him has already, they've already put it out there that we want this player. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, Coutinho is another example, came in from Barcelona and now at Aston Villa. If you had a situation, okay, I mean, let's forget the anytime transfer window. If you had a situation where it was, look, the season has finished, look at the players you need to get, be careful, strategize. First of all, if you talk about excitement for the teams, imagine having to go, look at it like a draft system. You watch this draft system, the clubs actually go for the players they want. You know you cannot afford to be daft in a transfer window. There'll be bidding wars for players where a player will have to go, maybe I should go here, maybe I shouldn't go here. It'll be exciting for the fans, exciting for the clubs. And then as a manager, you need to understand, if you buy X amount of players, you only have them for a year. You're not going to go anywhere. I mean, here's my suggestion, Big Steve. This is another suggestion I'm going to make. Instead of the January transfer window, one transfer window, however, you can loan players out at any time during the season. What do you think?
If the club that's being loaned, that is taking the player, takes on the full wages and everything, none of this negotiation about how much is paying wages and all that kind of stuff. If you're going to loan a player, you take them lock, stock and barrel, their wages and everything. Because then, to me, that makes it fair.
No,
Fairer.
it doesn't necessarily balance the books all the times, though.
What do you mean?
And when you say fairer, I mean, some of these bigger clubs that have money are willing to send this guy out for like job experience for younger players, or get your sharpness back. So in terms of negotiation part, I have no idea. But
but you're not going to get players going out on loan and sitting there not playing because the club that they've gone to has not really got any investment in them. It's just a number for them. They're not paying the wages. It's still being paid by the big club because the big club wants that player to get more playing time, and it doesn't kind of work out. If the club that's taken the loanee has to pay their wages, they've made an investment in that player. The club he's coming from wants him to get game time and experience, and the club he's gone to want to use him. It's an investment there. There's no, how can I say, it can't be manipulated as such by clubs that's got a lot of money over clubs that hasn't got a lot of money. The loan market would be fairer, in my view, if you go with your suggestion.
Okay, so if you go, do you agree? So if let's assume that we've added what you just said, do you think it do, as a fan, and knowing that every decision that is being made for players that you need has to be tactical, strategic, one transfer window, will you go for that?
With the loans in between?
Yes.
With the loans for the rest of the season? Yeah, that will work, I think. Because it gives, if you then change manager, then it gives you an opportunity to do some business to affect the squad as a new manager coming in. If it was just one transfer window and you couldn't do nothing for the whole until the next summer, you're kind of stuck if you change managers.
I'm sure with one transfer window there'll be different rules. You'll probably be able to register more than 25 players at any given time. There'll be a good advantage in terms of bigger clubs that play more competition. Cup games probably be more exciting because okay, this is the crop of players you have, and you try and give other people a chance. But I'm sure Neil is still going to disagree with me. So, what are you saying, Neil?
What, bringing loans throughout that? No.
Surprise.
So the transfer window was brought in order to make it fairer for clubs, and players to be able to move in and out of the clubs. The alternative was for players to have contracts and then potentially just leave them and serve notice of 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or whatever the contract would be, which would be an absolute disaster for anyone involved. Allowing players to leave on loan, Steve was probably right about the fact they'd have to pay the wage. I think that was more for the fact that of his player leaving to go for Barcelona would not have enough full wage covered. It was upsetting him. I think that's the real reason for that one, wasn't it, Steve? The transfer window is the best of a bad situation, right? Because you need the stability. If you want to start bringing in other rules of what we do, is you don't allow clubs to get rid of managers for the season. They've got to keep them. Like, you make that manager, that's your you have to keep him for the whole year. That's just part and parcel of it, because that's the only way the managers think going to get the best out of their players. If we say what you can loan and then you can have more players, I think at one point Chelsea had like 47 players, first team players on their book, and it was 22 loaned out. Arsenal were the opposite. They had 25 players in their book, 23 of those were loaned out. And then they had to rely on the youth. So there's a whole situation of where these loans don't end up working. And everyone was moaning that Chelsea stockpile players, going, you've got too many players, you can't have them all in the books. And they're like, yeah, but we're loaning them out. Yeah, but that's unfair. Unfair on who? The poor clubs. So we have to have a fair system that makes the clubs that aren't, and I say poor, and I don't mean that they're dirt poor, but in relation to how much money Chelsea's got, and Newcastle's got, and Man City's got, a lot of the other clubs don't have as much money. You then look at the situation that Newcastle are now in, where they've got a lot of money in January, and the investment came in because they were sold midway through the season. They haven't had a chance to buy any players until now. And all the other Premier League clubs were upset that Newcastle have got money because they're no longer the wealthiest clubs because Newcastle have got more than them. So you have this situation of actually the only people that ever get upset about anything are the perceived big clubs. The rest of the little clubs just carry on with, you know what, we just want to get the best out of who we've got. So we answered a question for Man U, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea. I want to say Spurs in there as well. If I've missed anyone out, Liverpool, right? They're the ones that are the big ones in the league. They're the ones that go, right, we want players here, we want players there. All the other clubs would probably love to be able to pick up a player for nothing through it, but we have to have a balance of good versus a bad. And I think at the moment, it's the best of a bad situation. And if someone makes a bad signing in January, they've not done their research properly. And if it takes a player 6 months to come in...
Are you sure? You could still do your
100%
research.
sure.
You could still do your research, think you're going to get everything wonderful, and then it still doesn't work out. The research doesn't particularly mean that...
Because we don't research players like we used to, right? We don't just go on, oh, this player's really quick, he can finish. There's a lot more to it now. We've got psychology. We have people going, how does he fit in? What's he like in there? They don't just now look at the player and go, oh, he's really, really good, let's bring him in. That doesn't work. They now have to think
you talk about balance. You talk about balance. You talk about these different things, and then the January transfer window actually started in 2002. So the Premier League is what, 92. So between 92 and 2002, did you think it was not balanced? Did you think the one transfer window was, or the anytime transfer window was bad?
I was 10. I knew better. I was from the days where passbacks were allowed, right? And everyone was like, oh, we bought pass. No, that's not fair on football. How is a goalkeeper going to waste time? Assume you figured that rule out, right, of how to get around it. You remember those, don't you, Steve, right? Oh, passbacks, oh, no, they can't play football. What do you mean they can't play football? Oh, they can't touch you with their hands. And then there was about 3 seasons where you had a passback, and that was about it. And that's not happened since. Like, we had, but who was buying players back then? Man United were buying players back then. You didn't have many people having the money to buy players in 1992. There wasn't anyone buying anyone. I think Trevor Francis was the first. Trevor Francis, Sheffield Wednesday player, was the first £1 million player. Let's put that out there, right?
You keep talking about Man United buying players. Other clubs were buying players.
I'm not saying that they're not, but I'm saying before then, they were one of the biggest clubs that could just buy anyone throughout the season. The small clubs are the ones that suffer. So if, say, Burnley signed a world-class striker in January, well, he isn't, but he is a world-class one once he's there, and that would be unfair of them to be able to get rid of him at any time. Come October the next season or December, he can get bought. That's unfair.
The fact that a player can move at any time doesn't mean the club will be willing to let him go. You're still on the contract, and if the club decides he wants to go, then you don't want you to go. So it's not like once another club comes and snaps their fingers, you're going to go. It's not going to work like that.
Well, when a big club comes for you, you've got to have a bit of respect for the littler clubs. In Spain, everyone has to have a release clause. So does that mean everyone has to have a release clause that no one can ever afford? So that means I think one of the youngsters for Barcelona just signed a €1 billion euro release clause in his contract. Yeah, which is ridiculous, right? Who's ever going to pay that? But that was just to get rid of that stupid rule. But that was to stop clubs with more money than Barcelona buying him throughout the transfer window and going behind their back. We'll end up bringing in other rules over a period of time. And it's the bigger clubs that unfortunately ruin it for the smaller clubs with inflated fees, inflated wages, and then everyone else is playing catch up and going, "Oh, we've got no money." Of course, we've got none because we can't afford it.
I don't know if it's inflated for the player if it's going to go, but you never know. These big clubs didn't just wake up one morning and become big clubs. Over the years, with different things have happened. But with the January transfer window, I think it's just. I don't know. I think there's just a substance there that's missing, and it just makes things look. I mean, it's good in certain situations, but I'm not quite sure there's the right balance to it.
It's more, to me, the January transfer window is reactive. There's not much planning in it. It's just people are reacting to situations that they find themselves in and trying to throw money at for a solution, and that's what it is. If you move it to an all season transfer window, you will get the bigger clubs trying to address their problems at any time. So they'll change the manager and then go on a big spending spree at whatever time in the season. At the moment, they're kind of restricted because the big clubs won't make big moves in January. They'll do it all in the summer, play the season, and then wait. January, they may do it if they've changed manager, but if they haven't changed manager, they'll generally just ride it out for the rest of the season. So I think January window provides more control over the big clubs and their spending power.
Okay, so I mean, we've spoken about it. Both of you in agreement with the January transfer window. Just to come to a nice, wonderful, sweet end. Big Steve, let's have you go on the tangent to explain why the January transfer window is there, and why you want it to stay, and why it should continue to stay, and then we can quickly go to a man that's very good with tangents, and Neil will do the same. So let's go with you, Big Steve.
Yeah. I think keeping the January transfer window, as I just explained, it kind of keeps a reign or control on the big clubs. In terms of that, they don't go hell for leather and spend a lot of money. All their serious investment takes place during the summer window. They'll have a manager, they'll plan it, and that's when they make all their big purchases. They don't generally react in January. January is more for the smaller clubs. They can react to their situations. They're fighting relegation or trying to make a push up the league. Then they can go and get loan signings from sometimes the bigger clubs, because the big clubs have players that surplus to requirements, but they need game time. And they need to be in the transfer. They need to be in the market to get minutes to then move on in the summer. So at the moment, it kind of works in the favour of the smaller clubs in the league.
Good tangent, but spoken like a man that has a thing against big clubs. Neil.
Okay, let me take a big breath. I'll see
Please
if I can do
do.
this
Ladies and
without
gentlemen, brace
pausing
yourself,
once.
because we could be here till tomorrow. Brace yourself.
I'll finish this off next week. The January transfer window is there to help level the playing field, but also I firmly believe that it's really helpful for the players that aren't playing football. If you look at all the ins and outs of the moment of just the Premier League, you'll find most of the teams, apart from the three, have got more players out than in. So it shows that what it's really doing is helping out the footballers go and get some first team football. Now, these might all be a lot younger, but they wouldn't have been able to go out and get any football at other teams at any other time. So now they've come in, they've gone, right, we haven't got a football. Or you might have an academy 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20 player who is outgrown his current team, and now he needs some first team football at somewhere else. So he's going to go to maybe a perceived lower Premier League team than he's currently at. So what we're doing is we're helping out those players get some good first team football, putting themselves in the shop window as well, whether it's for a new contract at their existing club or somewhere else. It also regulates the big spending of the big clubs, because they can just buy players when they want. Liverpool already topped Tottenham with an overpowered bid, so it shows that there's money there, and if they've got it, they can flex it as and when they want. And Liverpool aren't a club that usually go out flexing their muscles, but they can if they want. Man United, regardless of what anyone says, have been a massive club for a lot longer than you or I can remember. They were big in the 60s, maybe before then. I don't know. I wasn't born way before then, but they've always been a big club. So they've started off as a big club before the Premier League even came about, right? They were already big. So they have the financial power to buy whoever they want. They're also listed on a stock exchange, so they're a business, and they're worth a hell of a lot of money. So they can borrow a lot of money should they wish to buy anybody. They have power beyond the realms of capability that we know. Newcastle are in the same situation, and everyone got panicked because Newcastle had money. So imagine if Newcastle could just buy players as and when they want next season, when they've got a fair playing field from the start of the season. They stay up and go, you know what, we can offer your player twice as much money as you've got. And everyone's like, no. But they're doing that. You told me I could go as long as I want. They're doing that in October and November and December. So it's fair, and it helps out the footballers. And we've got to make sure that we're helping out the footballers and the lower clubs as much as we possibly can. And I think this is the only way that they can do it.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you have heard it from Big Steve, and you've heard it from Neil. They believe the January transfer window makes sense. I am kind of convinced, but I still think there's something that doesn't make it really balanced. So that's why we have the future show. And of course, if you disagree or agree, please leave some comments. And then continue to join us on this journey. Subscribe, watch, hit that like button, and see what happens. So we are done for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Big Steve, thank you for being here and, talking about loan players and making sure everybody else and attacking big clubs. And of course, Neil, thank you for not taking a breath and just going on and on and on. We shall be back with more episodes of the future show every Wednesday. Till then, it's goodbye from Big Steve. And
See you later, people.
And of course, goodbye from Neil.
Bye.